Today on New Mexico Rising, we'll sit down and have a conversation with Professor David Clements, Professor of Business Law at New Mexico State University. We'll talk the Maricopa County election audit in Arizona, January 6th, and of course, the state of affairs in New Mexico as businesses reopen. Stay tuned.
Today on New Mexico Rising, we're going to be having a discussion with David Clements. He holds a Juris Doctorate from the University of New Mexico School of Law. He was a Senate candidate in 2014. He served in various roles publicly. He's currently a professor of business law at New Mexico State University. He serves as a trial consultant for civil litigation firms. Earlier this year, he gained a certain amount of national attention after speaking out against what he believed to be mischaracterizations of Trump supporters, as well as other apparent falsehoods, which were perpetrated by the president of New Mexico State University, John Flores. Since gaining fame and notoriety, depending on who you ask, Clements has gone on to providing commentary on several national platforms, including Tucker Carlson Tonight and War Room Pandemic with Steve Bannon. We'll be discussing repercussions of the ongoing audit in Maricopa County, as well as the aftermath of January 6th and the state of affairs in New Mexico, as what remains of the business community begins to finally open up. But before we get into any of that, we should probably talk about lizard people. Thad, what is going on? Why?
Well, first of all, welcome back. We missed you.
Yeah. From my
your
hiatus. Yeah, it was a hiatus.
But
that was a paying job, though. So
okay. No, what are you talking about, man? We get the Koch brother. We get the Koch brother money. The lizard people comment. I don't know. I think it was a joke that fell flat. I mean, it's kind of like the deplorables moment of 2016, where our beloved Hillary Clinton decided to call basically 70, at that point, about 60 million people like deplorables, because at that point, I guess that's how many votes Trump got last time, other than until the record was set.
The numbers on votes, I'm not sure.
Yeah, whatever, votes. But no, I mean, I think this is, something that will be to her detriment. And I hope, as we had Jay Block on last week, and subsequently more candidates, throw their hat in the ring, this will probably be a rallying cry. I mean, we will take it, we will meme it, and we will, shove it down her and her supporters' throats.
Yeah.
People, I don't think, tend to understand, which is probably why they canceled their Espanola event. They don't tend to understand that, like, the hatred that is swelling for the people who are not in the cosmopolitan circle of the state, Santa Fe and Albuquerque, really don't like this woman.
She is really not liked among certain circles, and it's really starting to fester.
Yeah.
I mean, and to the point, but this is the nature of politics that we're dealing with right now. I mean, I was just amazed with the entire incident with the flying sex toy that apparently wasn't a sex toy. Now it was a sock that was filled with paper and had googly eyes on it. But it's kind of absurd watching how this continues to just get uglier and uglier and uglier.
Because power and the race toward it, the you must grab the ring, don't cast the ring into the flames and the smoldering flames of Moldor. But it's going to get uglier as we get kind of close to this and stuff like that. It's par for the course. National politics, state level politics has become national politics, which has become increasingly nastier. And yeah, the rhetoric is getting to the point where, I mean, I'm shocked that there aren't gun battles in the street between the Bolsheviks and the Miskoviks. But I don't know.
Yeah, let's hope that holds out. And speaking of ugly things, I mean, we're a couple of bald guys. Let's get a guy on with some great hair.
dude.
Just amazing hair.
Yeah.
Professor, how are you doing?
Oh man,
We really appreciate you coming on.
great intro. Thank you.
Well, yeah, we do what we can. I guess we can get right into it. I had seen where you were somewhat reluctant with your newfound fame. How do you feel about it now?
I still don't like it. I mean, I would prefer that we have elections that we could trust and that I could just go to class and teach. That would be my preference. But if I've got a platform and people want to listen to me, I figure that I'm just going to try to steer eyeballs towards election integrity. Some of the stuff going on with COVID, and then critical race theory is the third.
Yeah. I mean, when you said that you didn't vote for Trump, I mean, that's kind of been a big thing, that you didn't vote for him initially, and then you saw his policies. And I think there's a lot of people out there who can agree with that, who feel that same sentiment, where, you know, they didn't like him at first, but after seeing what he actually did, they kind of warmed up to him. And then you see the election just kind of go all squirrely, for lack of a better word. And we move forward where we're dealing with Maricopa County, and they're doing the audit there. And apparently it's about 67% done now. So they expect to be wrapping up here pretty quickly there, is my understanding. But what even gets gained out of that in your mind?
Momentum. It's a gold standard audit. A lot of people have been talking about audits having been performed across the country. That's in a sense it's true, but these were risk limiting audits, which are virtually worthless, because if you believe that there was widespread fraud, the benefactors of this fraud are the ones that are controlling the levers on how the audits are conducted. So why Maricopa is important is that they've done a full forensic audit. A forensic audit is very different than a risk limiting audit. So we get to look at canvassing. We get to look at whether or not people, if you look at their address, if it corresponds to a home, or whether it corresponds to a parking lot, or whether it corresponds to a P.O. box. When you look at the forensics, you get to look at the quality of the paper. Where did the paper come from? Whether or not there were pre-printed ballots that basically were where the bubble was entered into with a device, as opposed to someone actually filling it out. Looking at the routers, looking at whether or not there was any foreign interference from hostile countries. Completely different than a garbage in, garbage out audit, which is what we've seen in many places.
Yeah, I would say that is the fact. I mean, you've mentioned that you didn't feel like there were any evidentiary hearings in regards to this. Everything was rejected based off of standing, and even, you know, the president obviously didn't have standing to present any of these lawsuits and legal challenges. And I think that's what a lot of people were upset about more than anything. Was it did seem like the justice system and the courts was really failing us as a people to provide the kind of evidence or even scrutiny that really a national election deserves.
Yeah. For me, it was just a matter of being perplexed that there wasn't a full hearing. I mean, the fact that you had as many sworn affidavits filed by people that observed widespread election fraud, it's never been this bad. We had over 5,000 sworn affidavits across the country. You had over 12,000 incident reports filed that the RNC is in possession of. And the response is what was puzzling to me. You know, within 24 hours of November 3rd, people were saying this is the safest and most secure election in history. And, you know, it's hard to reconcile those media claims when you're listening to people saying, no, this is what happened. These machines were hooked up to the internet. We saw massive vote flips. Why were machines shut down at 10 o'clock at night in 4 swing states as if there was a reboot? How is it that we can account for hundreds of thousands of votes coming back when we came back online that were in favor of Biden? So, what frustrated me initially was that we couldn't even have an inquiry. We couldn't even ask questions to get to the evidence. And while there were a few what we would call evidentiary hearings, they weren't meaningful. So there was a handful where the court set an hour. But to put that in perspective, the evidence was there's so much evidence that you couldn't actually hear it. And so in Arizona, there was an evidentiary hearing. It was 1 hour long. The lawsuit that was filed in that case was 400 plus pages. 300 of those were exhibits that were attached to it. So you couldn't have read the lawsuit, let alone look at the evidence. And in Nevada, there was thousands of pages. There's another lawsuit, and I think they set a hearing for about an hour there. I think those are the only two that come to mind out of 450 lawsuits. The rest, you didn't have a merits hearing, or there was something along those lines where they were just the judges just checking off a box and telling people that the evidence sucked.
What do you say to people who maybe think that this is payback for 2000 or 2004? We've heard these accusations before. Typically, they come from the left when they don't win. I mean, what makes these challenges and this movement around, let's actually look at the election and let's try to learn from it and create new rules and laws so that we can ensure election integrity? What's the difference between 2020 and I don't know, the crazies of 2014 and the Ohio and the crazies of 2000 when it came to Florida?
Well, the first thing would be just the scale. The scope of the fraud is far, far worse than it was in 2000, 2004. The other thing that I would push back against is the payback notion. People need to realize that if Maricopa turns out the way that I think it is, it's not just the Democrats that are going to look bad. It's the Republicans. And so the scale here shows to me that both parties are wildly complicit in what's happened. And so it really shouldn't be about, the progressives are talking really loud against this, or the Republicans. If you look at who's fighting the audit in Maricopa County, the Republicans are fighting it too. Doug Ducey doesn't want the audit to happen. You've got Republicans that are part of the Board of Supervisors. The previous recorder was a Republican by the name of Adrian Fontes. So they're scared about what this is going to reveal. Same thing in Georgia. Don't forget that Brian Kemp is a Republican. Brett Raffensperger is a Republican. That's the Secretary of State and the governor. They don't want a full forensic audit. So, I think this is one of those things where I, as a former trial attorney that is very familiar with how you get evidence into a court of law, there are certain gatekeepers that have done everything that they can to ensure that the American people don't get to look at this stuff. Instead, they want media experts to just tell you what to think. And it's not working. Thank God it's not working. Mm-hmm. So we're 8 months in, and it looks like Maricopa has been done well enough where the feedback is generated to where Pennsylvania sent a delegation out. It looks like Georgia's going to do one. New Hampshire is coming alive. Wisconsin. So I expect that states, even Florida. Trump won Florida. Florida, DeSantis said we need to do an audit here as well. So we want audits everywhere, because what we got is a stench of corruption. I think over 42% of the country believes that, systemic fraud led to a result that we don't have any confidence in.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's problematic. We're trying to move forward, and everybody talks about healing and all of these other things, but those questions still remain for a lot of people. And it is somewhat disturbing that it does seem like a rather large portion of the power structure isn't interested in having that discussion. And as you say, the gatekeepers have done everything possible to keep any of this information from coming to light. What does that say to you about the state of our country right now, that half of the country seems fine with just, pulling the covers over it and ignoring it like it never happened? And what does it say if these audits do come forward and they do show that there was widespread fraud? What sort of a situation does that put this country in your mind?
Well, it puts us in a better position because we're operating with an appropriate diagnosis of the problem. So everyone wants to skip to 2022, 2024. Political consultants, everyone saying, let's do legislative fixes. And what I've been telling people is that you've got a corpse, you've got a dead body. The American people's vote was murdered November 3rd of 2020. And there's no justice unless you can figure out who done it. If this is a murder mystery. And we have to go wherever the facts take us. Now, that might be unpleasant. It might force many people to come to grips with the fact that certain people that we've given a pass, whether it's the FBI, Department of Justice, Republicans, they're going to have blood on their hands, figuratively. And so I think if you've got the psychological wherewithal to deal with unpleasantness, you can now move ahead, but move ahead with confidence. And so I think the biggest challenge here is most Republicans, if you're a Trump supporter, November 3rd, yeah, I get it. It's easy for you to say, well, we think something's wrong, and maybe not even investigate it. And it's easy to demonize progressives and Democrats because they're on the other team. It's like a football match. The problem now is that the evidence that we're seeing out of these different states are showing bad guys in both parties. And that's a good thing because we need to figure out who they are to flush them out, to get honest and honorable people to replace them. So, it's dark, it's depressing, but I have faith that we're going to win. And when we do, great, let's expose them all and get people with integrity to fill all those positions.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that, but let's say maybe some of us who don't necessarily think that it was a concerted effort. I think this is a precinct by precinct widespread kind of thing. I don't think anyone coordinated anything. If anything happened, I think there was a groupthink associated with it. There's a cultural rotten aspect to this. There's you laid out my trifecta for 2020 and why things went terribly wrong, from election integrity, COVID, and the George Floyd riots, which basically started now forcing down our throats critical race theory. For those of us who don't, who are like, yeah, man, something really bad happened, but like we don't want to deal with the cultural, sometimes professional consequences of actually bringing this up. I mean, you can understand why some Republicans, even though they're just like, yeah, well, something bad happened. All right, let's move on because, I don't want to get like figuratively decapitated professionally. I mean, what do you say to those people, right?
Well, I think this has been a long time coming. There have been, the Tea Party movement years ago was born out of a frustration with rhinos. That's why you had, in 2012 and 2010, before that, a groundswell of constitutional conservatives take hold of different positions. Now, like any war, there's pushback. So you had the Romney factions, the Ryan factions, the Liz Cheneys of the world, trying to create their narratives. And what's frustrating for the American people, and the reason why you don't see registration increase within the Republican Party in New Mexico and many other states, is because they are so jaded. So Trump comes along and is kind of the everyman, anti-swamp, the swamp killer, right? And he gives Republicans hope, right? So we trust this guy because he's an outsider more than we trust the political machine. And what he did is he basically delivered a giant red pill to the American people and showcased how much corruption was out there. And so Republicans that are Republican in name only don't like that. And so the comparison that I've made is it's a lot like, I'm a big fan of the Denver Broncos. I love the Denver Broncos.
I'm sorry.
Well, there's absolution for you at some point. But the point is this, if the ref misses a flag when my guy's holding, it's football. I don't really care because I want my team to win. It's like, we need to stop approaching politics the way that we approach professional sports, where we're kind of okay as long as it favors our team, because the vote's sacred. And so what I would say is, if you're a Republican, if you're a party man, you need to get away with it, because you need to get away from that mindset. So if you're a political consultant that's running campaign races and you're not doing a thing to investigate fraud? Because one thing I'll tell you, Thaddeus, is a lot of people that don't have a strong sense of whether there's a widespread conspiracy fraud, they have that because they haven't investigated. I've devoted like every spare minute to look at the cases, to look at the evidence. And I've challenged people, if they want to talk about the evidence, let's get precise. Let's look at a case. Let's look at an affidavit. Let's look at videos. And I guarantee you, if you sit long enough with me and you watch the video together with me with Ruby Freeman and Shay pulling out those ballots in Georgia, Fulton County, after we were lied to about a water main break, and we see people that are rerunning ballots, ballot after ballot for 3 hours with no Republican observers, that you're going to have an abiding conviction that not only is that wrong, it casts a shadow. Now that's just one county. Let's go to whatever county you want. And so that's the challenge is we're getting a little too close to the sun and people don't want to get burnt. And there's certain things where we wrap our identity in a party or we wrap an identity in a public figure. That could be Trump for that matter. And so what I'm trying to tell people is don't wrap yourself in a political identity, wrap yourself in the truth, whatever it is. And then we're going to be better off for it. We've got too many people that are treating politics like it's professional sports, and it hasn't served us well. I mean, there's a reason why we have the level of distrust that we have right now in government and in our elections. It's because we conveniently turn a blind eye when it's our team that's the beneficiary, and people are sick and tired of it. Like it's like the anti-war left. Everyone crapped on George W. Bush because of the Iraq War. And as soon as Obama was elected for 2 terms, you had more drone strikes than before. And then all of a sudden, the left was absolutely silent on war. And the level of hypocrisy, we're seeing that. It's like a ping pong match. It's made everyone sick.
Yeah, no, it's almost kind of like they're loving the left now, loving the institutions of the FBI and the intelligence industrial complex and all these people who were fighting the good fight against Trump and against for lack of a better word, a dissident administration and stuff like that. So that's kind of what drew me toward not necessarily liking Trump, but definitely supporting him, because it definitely lifted the veil about the fact that a lot of our institutions, going as far back as 2015, 2016, and now obviously 2020, that they're not to be trusted, they're corrupted, and that there's a narrative, right? You made the statement that like right after November 3rd, suddenly before all the votes were counted, this is the safest, most secure election ever. Same thing with things like COVID, or there's no lab leak hypothesis. And it seems like there's this mantra that typically goes out right after an event happens to set the narrative. And actually, I mean, let's kind of dovetail into January 6th, right? Within, I think the quintessential video that I watched of you this morning was just like, yeah, by the evening of January 6th, the narrative it went out that this was an insurrection, this was a affront to democracy and stuff like that. And like, that's what I think is definitely red pilled a lot of people, wherein they hear after a seminal event, the immediate hot take that comes out from your rhinos or your people who are in the establishment, a mantra that is, as we move further away from the event, becomes less and less true.
Yeah, well, not only that. So with the election stuff before that, you had people like Amy Klobuchar, Elizabeth Warren. You had Kamala Harris have congressional hearings talking about their concern over election vulnerability. And there's footage and video after video saying these machines could be hacked. We just watch them we watch people hack them. We have the experts. And then you got Harry Hursty, who did Kill Chain. Well, the significance of all that rhetoric was Trump was in office at the time. And so they're fine with having the specter of the truth that these election machines are vulnerable, as long as it means getting rid of the guy on the team that they don't like. It has nothing to do with the fact that they're really concerned about election integrity. It's he's on the wrong team. Now, fast forward to the 6th, you're right. It was the same thing. Within 2 hours, everyone had their narrative of who did what. And we know this is crap because right now the Department of Justice and all these folks have realized they can't prove their case. And they still have people being held without bond that are rotting in a jail cell on cases they know that they can't prove. Some have been dismissed. Others, like Jake and Jelly, who was the world famous Buffalo man, he's still incarcerated. And for what? Criminal trespass? Well, it's hard to prove a trespass case when you've got video after video showing cops unlocking doors. They had to have unlocked the doors because those were magnetic locks. They weren't breached any other way, but moving the barriers, waving people in. And now there's video of cops with people like Jake and Jelly inside the Capitol building saying, yeah, do what you're going to do. Just be careful. Don't destroy things. And you see a bunch of patriots saying, yeah, you heard the man. Let's treat the place with respect. And there's video of the guy praying in the main chamber. And so the talking heads, the media pundits can't keep up with the fact that you had at least 500,000 people there, all of which had smartphones. So every time someone has a narrative or a talking point that condemns Trump or Trump supporters as running roughshod, even though the president asked for the National Guard to be present and Pelosi said no, they can't keep up with it. So the FBI has kept backdating, or not backdating. They've kept asking for more and more time before they give their investigative report on what happened there. And the reason why this should be so mind-boggling for your listeners is that I've done so many cases. I've prosecuted thousands of cases, thousands. You would never have a trial without the criminal defendant having a police report in their hand to know what they're being accused of. Yet we had this little thing called an impeachment trial within a week and a half of the Capitol breach. Everyone made up their mind, but that wasn't based on the facts. So a lot of my insights early on that are aging quite well is just knowing this is how things work. You don't have a perfect snapshot. And it was bizarre to me that Kelly Loeffler, Mitch McConnell, and many of these Rhino Republicans seemed like they were more prepared to provide their condemnation of the quote unquote Capitol riot than they were to deal with the people's business that day, which was to have objectors to the dueling elected slates and to present evidence of widespread voting fraud. That started with Arizona. As soon as Arizona was on the clock, so to speak, that's when the breach occurred. So I think we're going to continue to find all kinds of information. Every day we're being proven more and more right, whether it's the Fauci emails, whether it's the so-called riot, whether it's the election integrity. And the people that have had to deal with all kinds of criticism that was unfounded, they're being proven right. The Fauci gate thing is huge. And that, I think this is just the first of many revelations that's going to come out in the next month.
Yeah, I think it's the tip of the iceberg. It's interesting when we talk about January 6th, obviously, for those of you that don't know, I'm a credentialed journalist that's facing charges for covering the event. So, we do see this where they rush to judgment. They already had a plan in place. And then when the correct president took control, you saw a lot more charges coming forward because they need to push a narrative. And that's what I'm seeing transpire in front of me in my own legal battles with it, and then observing the other cases with January 6th, is that there is a narrative, and it's very important that they continue to push that narrative. And it's disturbing. It's really disturbing to see how many different agencies are involved, how many different people are involved in pushing this. And there's pushback even within law enforcement and other places where they see it for what it is. I've spoken to several members of law enforcement on a federal level who all say that this is garbage, but people are still buying it. And it goes back to that same team thing that you talk about. And that was something I even observed at the Capitol that day. And it was disturbing then, where it felt more like, a football game, the way people cheer. And I'm looking at this and I'm going, wow, this is the future of our country. And this is how people want to treat it.
If you want a little bit of silver lining, the group that is holding on to those conventional narratives, like CNN, is shrinking. I don't know if you saw this, but compared to last May, CNN has lost 44% of their daytime viewers. They've lost 45% of their primetime viewers. They're not even in the top 5 anymore. So the folks that were peddling and continue to peddle these narratives, their audiences are shrinking. And then you're seeing the emergence of citizen journalists that are getting more and more subscribers and viewers collectively than any of these folks, because it's at the point now where people are like, I cannot trust anything that these folks are saying, their credibility. And I think this is the reason why Fauci is so important. With the revelation that he's known that the Wuhan virus came from a lab and he lied to the American people, the fact that he knew about hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin being treatments that worked.
Yep, particularly ivermectin.
Yep. Then you've got hundreds of thousands of people that died because, if you remember, in our state and others, pharmacists were unable to provide those treatments to people because of whatever garbage was coming from NIH and the CDC. And so there's literally blood on Fauci's hands. And this isn't sensationalized, because even the vaccines that are out there, we've got over 12,000 confirmed vaccine deaths, conservatively speaking. So the way that I would tie this to what we just talked about with the media narratives, no matter what we're talking about, remember, you've got all kinds of talking heads that have basically propagandized and helped a proven liar. And they've got egg on their face. And people are like, wait a minute. If this is true, you were telling us that this was true. You were telling us that Fauci should be trusted. You were telling us that hydroxychloroquine doesn't work, or ivermectin doesn't work. You were telling us that that we had to shift on mask policies. And behind the scenes, we're seeing a huge cover up. But I can't tell you this, with it's tragic, because now I'm talking to people who are saying, my grandmother died. My mother died. Someone's been pushing this vaccine and they're having serious health issues. And it's not abstract. Before it was, if we didn't have it, you could kind of just chalk it up saying, well, I don't know that person. Maybe it's true. Maybe it's not. The death toll has been astounding. And now that people are figuring out that people didn't have to die, every one of these talking heads, whether it's Chris Cuomo, Rachel Maddow, their witness is going down the veritable shitter because they tied themselves at the hip to Fauci. And once people realize, wait a minute, they lied to us about this, what's to say that they're not lying to us about the elections?
Exactly. And a lot of other issues. I mean, in particular, I think, if the year hasn't taught us anything, right, it's just like now you should probably start looking askew at your institutions that you held in high regard. And it's not, CNN's viewership going down, I think, is actually a good thing. It's Schadenfreude as far as we're concerned, but they had an amplification medium in the form of social media. You yourself are dealing with issues. I tried to hit your YouTube channel this morning, and not much there, but thank God you're over at rumble.tv. And yeah, I'm the tech geeky guy, and I've been talking for a better part of a couple of years, and the Zach Voorhees of the world been talking for a couple of years about the fact that, like, there is an unholy alliance between conventional wisdom, the establishment, and big tech, and that regulatory capture has already happened, in the sense that they were the ones suppressing people talking about CRT, the PCR testing in those cycle thresholds, ventilators being the thing that we have to do. Hydroxychloroquine is not safe and effective. All this other stuff. They were pushing this. They were getting rid of people on social media platforms who were talking about get your butts outside, masks. There's a little bit of exaggerated efficacy of their use. And so, yeah, at the same time, the mainstream outlets they're getting curb stomped, and rightly so, because they're terrible. But they had the social media platforms, which now have the true power of disseminating propaganda, have taken up that mantle.
Yeah, well, and there's other things that I'm looking back now with a speculative eye. Right now, it's easy to just speculate about anything, but
yeah.
Remember when you couldn't get toilet paper, right?
Yeah.
Well,
for a respiratory illness. So,
but then you also look at like lumber shortages. Lumber prices are going through the roof, but people are documenting and finding that lumber yards are fully stocked. Now, I can't just make a direct correlation, or I can't say that it's the same thing with the toilet paper, but it makes you wonder if we're going to be lied to about sources of viruses, we're going to be lied to about efficacy of vaccines, if we're going to be lied to about all these things. And then we're also having a manipulation of supply and demand with lumber, with materials,
meat,
right? When you have the Chinese government hacking everything from pipelines to solar winds, and all of a sudden,
no, professor, that's the Russians. Russia.
Yeah, it's the Russians, right? Right. But so you've got like all of these things that are super complex, but they can't manage to hack our elections. And so it's interesting now, as more information comes out, more and more of us are connecting the dots. And a lot of people that, maybe they are conspiracy theorists. Maybe some of them are going to sources or information that isn't accurate. But these folks, more or less, are actually being proven right day in and day out. This is kind of the time where if you had a tinfoil hat, you're probably putting it back on and proudly displaying it.
Yeah.
Because the batting average of the conspiracy theorist is far more accurate than what we've gotten from CNN, far more. And right now, the Fauci Gate stuff is bearing that out.
So how does all this relate back to New Mexico? And I mean, obviously we have Dominion machines here as well, which is fantastic to think about. And New Mexico has a long-standing history of, no corruption at all. I'm sorry, sarcastic again. But it's like all of this stuff does relate back. And what can people in New Mexico do, in your mind? I mean, what do you want to see New Mexicans doing to take a positive approach moving forward?
I think that New Mexicans need to get involved in precinct elections, basically be committee men and committee women at every single level of local government. That we need to have folks that run for every type of office. Now, let me caution you. I think we have to solve the machine problem before you have any confidence in the results in those elections. And then I would ask and demand and work towards a full forensic audit in every single county. So if you can have that confidence, now I'll tell you this, the Secretary of State, she's not going to work with you on a full forensic audit. Your county clerks, unless they're in red counties, will not work with you on a full forensic audit. They'll give you a piecemeal. Basically, they'll say, here's 30% of ballots in 5 polling locations. There you go. And they purposely design it. They'll even tell you, because I know this is what's going on in Doña County. They'll tell you that you can have 9 people. You can get 30% of the ballots at 5 locations out of 35 or 40 locations. And it's purposely designed to where you can't catch or have a full picture of what happened in your county. So what we're doing, we're modeling this. This isn't just me on YouTube. We're demanding and pushing back against the county clerk and the Secretary of State. And we're hoping that breakthroughs will come out in Maricopa to assist us with shining a light. But we need folks to stop being armchair bitchers and complainers and turn up the heat. But it starts foundationally with securing the vote and making sure that everything there is above board. And then the second thing is you have to get involved in your school races, school board races, county, all the stuff that we've always kind of thought no one wants to run for. Everyone wants to run for governor or something like that. No, get local, get control. And that's the call to action. I can tell you this, though, the cynicism, the hopelessness doesn't accomplish anything. Nothing will happen if we don't get involved. So look at what you're doing. And if your first instinct is to say, I'm too busy, well, so is everyone. This comes down to making sacrifices. And I guess the incentive I would provide to your viewers on why it's better than doing nothing, even if you don't think it will do any good, it feels better. I feel emotionally, psychologically, so much healthier than I was back in November because my medicine is I'm going to get after it every day. And I feel great because I'm finding other people. And then we encourage one another and our numbers are growing and growing and growing to the point where we've got thousands and thousands of patriots out there that aren't going back. There's no going back to the apathetic New Mexico lifestyle that we had before. We're either going to figure this out and fix it. And I'm not going to say, or we're not, because we're going to keep at it. But it's going to come to a point where someone like MLG, who's getting very, very nervous, canceling her events now after insulting the lizard people. These folks are scared, and their old methods aren't working. And so the one advantage that we have is numbers. I'm not talking about Republican versus Democrats. There's people that are committed to the truth. We have numbers. We just don't have a sense of our power yet. And I pray for the day where we hit critical mass, where we, the people, understand how much power that we have. We can transform our elections overnight. We can transform our politics overnight. But we need to stop taking permission or getting permission from gatekeepers, whether it's in the Republican Party, Democratic Party, the county clerks. We tell them what to do. And we can make life a living hell for them when we're motivated, we're organized. And that's what's happening right now spontaneously. And I think we're going to get better and better. We need to look at places like Maricopa County as a template to copy and bring it here and see what will happen.
So speaking of school boards and getting after it, you one of your claims to fame was definitely pushing back against critical race theory. And what we've seen anecdotally in our press outlets and other press outlets is like a lot of parents now, having spent the year, watching Zoom schooling and having, dealt with the hardship of that, and having kids have lost valuable, teaching hours in government schools, much to my dismay, start to push back, start to actually show up at these school board meetings and stuff, and doing, again, that kind of grassroots on the ground insurgency type stuff where they're just kind of going and they're confronting these people and stuff like that. Does that also give you some hope, man, that like people are actually starting to like at the county level, particularly at the school board level, the most important level, starting to push back against just critical race theory, and then the rest will fall into place with all the other endeavors that we need to do to push back on the local level?
Yeah, I'm super encouraged. Now, in other states, they're showing up and they're actually being so vocal that they've had school boards and people get up and leave the meeting. And when they did that, the people ended up electing new school boards right then and there. And they did it by Robert's Rules of Order. They abolished the mask mandate right away. And then a lot of them are starting to throw out the critical race theory curriculum. So when you see that happening, the first thing that it signifies or alerts others is, you mean we can do that? we can do it. And people are figuring out, yes, we can. And so those brave souls, when people post a video on YouTube and it goes viral, or it goes on Facebook and it goes viral, people are saying, I'm going to try that. And they are, and they're being successful, especially on the critical race theory front, because a lot of the mask mandate stuff is rolled back in states like Texas and Florida. So it's not really a challenge, but critical race theory is a very popular thing for people to get rid of. Now, New Mexico, I would say in 5 counties, you have a hard time. I'm in a county, Doniana, that leans progressive. We've got progressive people in the city council, county commission, school board. But you go out to Chavez County, you go out to Eddy County, Lee County. We've got a lot of conservative counties. We've got 33 counties. By and large, most of them are conservative leaning. The problem is in your population centers like Bernalillo and Doniana, where we have most people. Now, that's going to be a fight, but what we need to do is encourage the 31 other counties to toss it out and toss out school board members and let the collective power of the state apply pressure on Bernalillo that this is not representative of American values. And so, yeah, the template's been there. It's been proven to work. But no, Doniana and Bernalillo, it's going to be hard to lead from there. I mean, we need people just to stand up and tell the truth. I say it's going to be hard because Las Cruces Public Schools just unanimously approved a critical race theory curriculum where I live. So it's not sunbeams and rainbows everywhere.
Well, nothing's ever sunbeams and rainbows everywhere, but it's nice to have a conversation and try to approach these issues rationally. Not everything has to be a screaming match. Not everything has to be lizard people or sex toys flying around in the air, breaking windows at the Capitol. Doesn't have to be that way. We can keep working through these things. Professor, thank you for coming on. We appreciate it so much. It was a great conversation. So
My pleasure.
Wish you well in your further endeavors. Keep up the fight.
All right. Y'all take care.
All right.
What's Baca doing?
Hello.
Oh, there you are.
I was enjoying the conversation so much that I forgot that I was actually supposed to be back here doing
Yeah, that happens to you a lot, doesn't it?
Look, squirrel.
Well,
No, man. Yeah, he was that was real talk. That's straight talk. I mean, it's refreshing to know that we have someone who has some national prominence and that's pushing back against this stuff that's here in the state, spitting hot fire, and is pushing these issues, stuff like that. And there was some white pills in there, and I appreciate that.
Every once in a while,
yeah,
we take too many of the black pills. Red pills don't do us any good anymore.
Well, happy Sunday, everyone.
It is a happy Sunday. It is a
All
happy
right.
Families, next Sunday, we're going to be, what we have, Harry Montoya is going to be our guest next Sunday. He's running for Secretary of State. Hit us with some good questions. Hit us on the New Mexico Rising group. Submit ideas for lizard people shirts, and let's keep the momentum going. And also, the Denver Broncos are the greatest football team in the history of the world. Goodbye.
Debatable.
It's disgusting what he just said.
Take us out of here.
Just roll the music. Baca. Thanks.